In this first video, we're going to take a little introduction at the concepts and principles of the UK Constitution. Okay, I'm going to start by looking at really what a constitution is, okay, and what kind of constitution we have in the UK. So firstly, what is a constitution? A constitution comprises the laws, rules and practices in which a state is governed. A constitution also allows for the setting out of formal relationships between different branches of government. So in most countries we have three branches of government. You will have your executive branch of government, you have the legislative branch of government, and then you have the judicial branch of government. And they are all responsible for different things and have different kind of relationships between them. And therefore a constitution outlines and sets out the rules that govern those three branches and the relationships between all three of them. A constitution also controls the outline of certain rights for citizens. This is often known as a Bill of Rights. So there's a difference between what we call a codified constitution and an uncodified constitution. Now, a codified constitution is one that is simply all written down in one place, okay? So, for example, the US Constitution consists of a single document with also 27 different amendments to it, okay? So if I was to say to you, show me the US Constitution, you could find the US Constitution probably online or just as a document, as a single little document, and you could show it to me, and that would be the entire Constitution laid out in a few pages. Now, on the other hand, an uncodified constitution is one which is not entirely written down in a single place. So, for example, the UK doesn't have a single document that we would call a constitution. It's interesting to note here because some people make the mistake of saying that a codified and uncodified constitution is the same as a constitution that's written down or not written down. That may be in partly true. However, the most important part of defining the difference between a codified and uncodified constitution is to make the point that the constitutions are written down in a single place. There are aspects of our constitution in the UK that are written down. However, they're not all written down in one document that we would call a constitution. So, what are the features of a codified constitution? So, if a nation has a codified constitution, the constitution exists as almost a higher body of law. It cannot simply be amended like a normal law passed by the legislature. And because it cannot be amended quite so easily, we say that the laws are entrenched. Okay, so the US Constitution is a very good example. It's a very good way of gauging the difference between a codified and uncodified constitution. The US Constitution sets out in, I believe, Article 4 or Article 5, the ways in which you can amend the Constitution, and the amendment of the US Constitution requires a lot of partisan decision making. So you need 75% of Congress to just get it proposed, and then to get it ratified, an amendment to change the Constitution to get that ratified, you need 3/4 of all the state legislatures around the US. So therefore, because it's so difficult to change and repeal and amend, the Constitution that is written down in one place is seen as being above normal legislation. And that's why we say that it is entrenched, okay? Features of an uncodified constitution are a little bit different. So, if a constitution is uncodified, it means there are no higher laws. As a result, in the UK, we have no entrenched laws or fundamental laws that are held above anything else. There has been examples of constitutions that have been codified in the UK in the past. Well, not necessarily in England in the past. So although the current UK Constitution is not codified, it is the view that the Commonwealth did have a written constitution following the Civil War between 1645 and 1649. Okay? So in 1653, the instrument of government was drafted. This provided a supreme legislative authority of the Commonwealth, which resided in the Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell. The instrument can be said to have been a codified constitution, and it exhibited the properties of a codified constitution. So we have had the sort of the framework almost of a codified constitution in the past. Some argued that the 1215 Magna Carta was almost like a codified constitution back in the nearly a thousand years ago. Okay. So what are the merits of a written constitution? What are the positives of having one that is codified and written down in one place? So if a constitution can only be changed by some special procedure, i.e. that the constitution is entrenched, it allows the courts to strike down any laws that are not in line with the constitution and claim them to be unconstitutional. That is why in the USA, if Congress wants to pass a law and people argue that that law is unconstitutional, it doesn't fit with the Constitution, it's almost like it contradicts parts of the Constitution, then the US Supreme Court will strike it down in a form of judicial review. It will review the legislation and strike it down as unconstitutional. That gives the courts a lot of power. A written constitution also allows for greater protection of civil liberties and human rights. So the first 10 amendments of the US Constitution is called the Bill of Rights, and it sets out the various rights that US citizens have. So the first one is the freedom of expression, the second amendment is the right to bear arms, and so on and so forth, okay? And it's a lot easier to claim your rights have been breached and to also get something done about it if you've got a constitution that is solid and entrenched that will strike down any decision that has been unconstitutional. When a situation of complex constitutional law arises, a written constitution would be able to outline the process to take. So, for example, if there was a complex political issue going on, the constitution, which is written down in one place, would be easy to look at and to decide what to do with it. Okay? So, an example I would give is the idea of Brexit in the UK. Brexit has brought about a number of different constitutional questions. Because our UK constitution is unwritten, it's forever changing and developing, okay? There have been a number of questions asked about the constitution during the sort of Brexit process. And with an uncodified constitution, it's not entirely clear how some of these complex political issues would be resolved, because there's no precedent for it. There's no way of just looking at a single document and saying, okay, if that happens, then this person is being unconstitutional. That's not how it works. It's a little bit more complicated, and a written constitution sort of solves those issues. There are still issues of complicated political issues within a written constitution, because the constitution cannot cover everything. It's quite a small document, the US Constitution is, for example, so it's a little bit easier to deal with them. So what are the merits of an uncodified constitution? So the nature of our uncodified constitution allows it to be shaped and changed quickly to address political and legal developments in society. For this reason, we say that the Constitution is organic. It develops, it molds, it's molded by the society around it. Okay, an uncodified Constitution also helps us to allow the judiciary to be apolitical. This means to have no political influence. Okay, so a problem in the US system is that their judiciary is political. They have justices that swing onto either side of the debate. Okay, and with our constitution being able to be molded and shaped in the way it is, it allows for our society to develop as the Constitution develops with it. Okay, so for example, in the USA, they don't have that same privilege to allow their Constitution to develop with it, which is why there are some certain amendments, like for example the right to bear arms, the right to own a gun, that in today's society and with today's technological developments in weapons and with the sort of climate that they have today, it would probably be seen that the society and the Constitution haven't sort of developed with each other. Does that make sense? That makes sense. So the idea that the Second Amendment would probably, if it was an uncodified constitution, this sort of idea would have gone away with society. However, it's still stuck and entrenched, and the right to own a weapon in the USA is still something that is heavily debated and will be for many, many years. So what about the nature of rights, constitutional rights in the UK? So there is some disagreement as to whether it's worth labelling some rights as constitutional rights in order to stress their importance. So to say something is a constitutional issue or a constitutional right may be a way of almost giving it a higher plinth to stand on with regard to all the other pieces of legislation and rights that are given. So on one hand, Lord Stein has remarked that to classify a right as constitutional strengthens its value in that the court is virtually always required to protect it. So when a case comes to the court, if you say that a right is constitutional, it allows the justices or the judges to protect that right and to set the precedent that that right is a constitutional right. So, for example, in the case R and Secretary of State for Home Department, XP Sims, Lord Hoffman stated, that the principles of constitutionality, little different from those which exist in countries where the power of the legislature is expressly limited by a constitutional document. Okay? So the idea is that the principles of constitutionality is not different from the idea of a codified constitution. So if you were to give certain rights constitutional rights in the same way as Lord Stein has said would allow the court to protect it, you're basically doing something that is no different to just having a codified constitution. Which, if depending on where you fall on the debate, may be a good or a bad thing.